And then the reality is like that's a little like even less. Obviously, you should. All right, should we do some attendance?
Okay, I'll start. All right, attendance time. Team 73. Team 73. Everybody here? Oh, awesome. Thank you. Team 74. That's okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Team 75. Thank you. Team 77. Awesome. Thank you. Team 78. Are you guys missing someone? Just 4? Okay, thank you. Wait, what team did I just call? 78? Okay. Team 79. Thank you. Team 81. Thank you. Team 82. Thank you. And team 84. Okay, Sharon? Okay, thank you. That's all the teams.
Cool. Welcome to the morning round 5 interim. We are halfway through the last world. It's kind of exciting, actually, and hearing about what everyone's working on, it seems like this is truly round 5. Like we've got Makey, we've got Foil, we've got keyboards, Vibe. Actually, sounds like no one's using Quests, which is exciting. Was not my prediction going in that like the Quest would be the thing left behind. Not surprising that we're not using HoloLens. But no, hopefully you're all excited. It seems like just a lot of exciting directions. The festival is definitely a context that is different to design for, but that reality is something that you're hopefully all using and thinking about. The idea of just having people have fun is a great way to motivate work. And I'm really excited as we're like, and heads up, the planning of festival is a constant thing. Like we are inventing and figuring things out on a daily basis, meeting with Drew and Janice and company tomorrow to like hopefully get invites sent out this week. We, I believe, have official approval to have a festival, which is really good. We've been working with informal, yeah, it sounds like it could work kind of permission, but we are going to do it. We're going to have people come. Our goal is everyone gets invitations to send out. I don't want to make, I'm sort of aware that I'm being streamed and all those things. Not like any promises, but it looks like my target is everyone will get about 2 invitations to send out. We're going to be doing stuff like how guests come and all those things. But bottom line is we are moving forward. We're going to make the festival as good as we can make it. And I think it'll be pretty cool. All those fun things. One little note, Mo is not here today. He is staying home for, he has ever so slight symptoms. So he's doing the correct thing, which is not coming in. So I'll be doing things solo. I'm going to lean on the TAs a little bit to be other guests, possibly as we get to stuff. And I think today, like really, it's more than ever, it's about feedback. It's about how are things going. It's about how do you make this better? How do you plan for next week? We are sort of shifting from these rounds are about an assignment that's due and it's going to get graded, and it's going to be graded. But my vision is this is building towards festival and how to make something that's really cool and how to like get something that guests would be excited to do, that it's practical, that will work, that's sort of like scoped in the right ways, and all that stuff. So like I said, today, that feedback of, so how are we going to make this work really well for festival is the main goal. So with that, I encourage you to let us be guests in your worlds, so we can sort of like get our hands on. And with that, any questions as we're about to get started? All right. So, which team's first?
Yep, so the first team is Team 73. Please come on up.
So, so hi, we are Team 73, and I'm the producer and artist. Here is Tinga, our sound designer, and do the part of the artist job. And also we have Justin, our artist, Hannah, and Jimmy is our programmer.
This is a two-player game.
All right, have you won the players?
So basically, our game uses networking to do the multiplayer things, and so we need two players to play the game at the same time. Okay, and we try to design the vibe controller as the to push the engine up and down. Okay, so first we have to check in our player's name. Okay, but I think it cannot work sometimes. Yeah, I think it cannot work right now. Yeah, it's not working. Just still the scene stopped. Yeah, just when you get entered and it will automatically pause the game. I don't know why.
Play the video.
Yeah. Okay, we will play the video since the game still has some problem. Okay, so two players will try to use Vibe Tracker to pass through the track, and there will be some obstacle throughout the track to block your way. And can try to turn your body around to move across them. And we're thinking of to build a scene in underwater and ocean scene. So there will be a lot of ocean creature. So that's basically our process right now.
So one, yeah.
Thank you.
Can you talk me through how the guests are going to control these submarines?
Yeah, we are going to use Vibe Tracker to control, like the.
With this, you will turn that.
The plan right now, I think, is to make physical levers and
Okay.
control it as if you were controlling an actual machine.
Okay, so I'm going to have basically two levers, and talk me through like that control. Is it like, do I have like two thrusters, and like, is it like skid steering where both forward moves me forward, like one this way makes me spin?
Yeah,
Like
so
that?
we're gonna have for the UI, we're gonna have like the left engine and right engine. So like if you're, as you said, if you're going like this, then your left engine will be working, will have more power than your right. So then you'll be turning this way, and then the opposite situation. And you'll also be able to do verticality as well. So
Whoa.
you'll be able to move like this way and this way as well.
Talk me through how you're going to do up and down. Yeah, improv skills. Like you show, like act this out.
Actually, there are two options right now. We are thinking of how to make the controller like it's tangible and not flexible, like the mechanism, maybe. Just maybe the joint is flexible. You can
Okay.
sort of pull it up, or maybe we'll just use 3D router for the up and down control.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, the controls are going to be a big deal with this. Like, I think it's going to be part of it that makes it really exciting. And like straight up, like a lot of the stuff you have going on is really, really exciting. I think I love the pixel style. Like you've got like sort of these chunky little submarines. I think the idea of like simplified graphics and pixel style for the course is really good. It's like nice and readable. Like I see those cute jellyfish, but I also know they're jellyfish, so I should dodge them. Like lasers, a lot of just really clear visuals on what this means, which is going to be really, really helpful. Like this, it's like really good communication of we are in a submarine, we're going forward, and our job is to dodge things and get to the end. And then I think two-player, like head-to-head, is going to be really good for interest. So you've got, I think, a good idea and strategy on an interesting level, like a relatively short but interesting course. We're going head-to-head. And then novel controls, like that's a great combination. Some things to watch out for. Whenever you see racing, it's a challenge to give both guests a sense of each other and actually have that feel connected. Because you sort of want the tension of who's about to win and like the fact that we're racing together. And absent sort of extra work on your part, there's a chance that the worlds will feel like just two people racing separately, and then one happens to win. Go ahead.
I don't know if it'll help, but we're also planning to allow them to bump each other as a way to kind of interrupt one another. So there's a little more.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to think about is where do you sort of put them in the same space and encourage them to actually interact. And this is a tricky thing with racing because if it's purely about skill and speed, there's a decent chance that one guest will pull ahead and there'll be no way for the person to catch up. I think thinking about how to get the two guests to interact is a really good thing to be thinking about. You may want to then think about how do you get them to sort of like pull each other, either I pull myself forward or I pull you back to me, so it helps get a lot of lead changes. And having moments where the guests are close together and where that lead change happens is where a lot of the excitement might exist. And a race that is less exciting, less interesting to watch is one where someone sort of like struggles and the other one person takes off and then they're always separated. And it's always one person in the lead, and you just know who's going to win. This is, if we look at like racing games, like the classic game that does this is Mario Kart for Nintendo. Like the idea of the blue shell is very much a design to sort of like bring the race back to that fighting, that interactive moment, as opposed to just pure skill and pure speed. So I think thinking about a simple way to do that, the challenge is you've got some controls that might be complicated. And so how do you get the guests to know what this world is about? And right now, what it feels like it's about is sort of skill in racing. Like you've got interesting controls and an interesting level, and the level is like the primary obstacle here. Like I've got to navigate it, I've got to like anticipate turning and diving through here. And so the guest who's better at the controls and better at the level is the one who's going to succeed. And bringing in an idea of like direct competition I think it's going to be strong, but it's going to take some cleverness to like keep that simplified so it doesn't overload the guest, and so it becomes this thing where you're both balancing a complicated level and balancing complicated, sort of like guest-to-guest interaction. And that sort of gets to like the idea of controlling steering and up and down. Like that's a level of complexity for controls which could be really intuitive, but it's going to take some thought of like how do you design that. One thing you may consider is going with sort of a simplified controller. So like, I think 2 levers is really cool. Like that's a nice, like it's both relatively intuitive. Like most people can sort of get, like to manage that. It takes a little bit of learning, a little bit of practice, but you can sort of get into the flow of that. Layering up and down on top of like a 2-thruster design, I'm worried that that would be complexity for a guest that would be hard for them to really absorb. You could go in a direction where you have a bit more of a just like a steering thing on a pivot, and you point it left and right to steer, and you point up and down to like basically spin around. The fact that you're using a Vive controller lets you be flexible, because the Vive controller has, you know, the full like 6 degrees of freedom, you know, telling you where its position is and also where it's oriented. So I would encourage you to design the controller to be as intuitive as possible for the racing you want guests to do.
Do you think if we create the controls as like a ball socket joint, it might be more intuitive?
Yeah, I mean, like that's my first instinct is the fact that you want the submarine to sort of like turn and basically point in a direction and then go, which is a nice intuition for a submarine, right? Like when I think about a car, I think about wheels and needing to turn the wheels to make it go. But for the most part, I have no idea how submarines really work, but the idea that they sort of go in the direction they're facing makes sense to me. And so a controller, which is basically which way do you want to point the submarine, matches how I think a submarine should control. And so that simplification might be helpful. And that might be a way to focus on this. It then might free you up to add in another element of control to the guest if you wanted them to have an interaction with the other guest. And I think that's the other thing to sort of solve for is the guest, are they like, is there's some simple power up or some simple interaction that they have that connects them to the other player, and that's sort of how you sort of jockey them back and forth. You could do things where there are things when you go over them, you sort of like hit them in the level, it triggers something that causes the other guest to like get stunned. And that's a way to do sort of a way of connecting them without extra controls. It's just a matter of like steering there. You can also add like a button or something like that to make things happen. So anyway, like fundamentally, the idea of 2 guests, submarines, I think you've got a really solid scope in terms of like the visual design. I think the controls are a thing to watch out for. And then just think about how do you get 2 guests to sort of like stay relatively close together so that you get that interest curve builds, and it's a relatively consistent one across different guests. Cool. Good work.
All right, next up is Team 74. This is a Jamel Drum World, so we'll be showing their video.
Good morning. So we have the Jam Drum World, and we are monsters versus robots. So our artist is Sunvi and Nolan, and our programmers are Angela. I'm so sorry. I was just like, Angelina and Nolan. Sunvi and Jeffrey are the programmers. I'm so sorry. So to briefly explain the mechanics really quickly, your only two controls are you have the big button that you can dash, and then you can move the disc to turn. The characters move constantly, and there's a recharge on the dash. And so the dash, you can either dash forward or you can run into other players, stunning them, and if they've got the ball, making them drop the ball. And the goal is to bring the ball back to your own base, so it's like capture the flag.
Does anything change when you have the ball? Or
Yeah, you
you
can't
can't
dash.
dash? Okay. That makes sense. Like, that you basically grabbing the ball puts you in a more vulnerable position. How do you drop the ball?
You don't.
If you get slammed by one of the other players, they dash it into you.
And do they then get the ball?
Not automatically, but you drop the ball, and so they can recover it or their teammate can recover
Okay, yeah. So if I'm thinking about the simple strategy here, I want to grab the ball and then get back to my base, my goal, and the other team wants to dash into me to get me to drop the ball. Can my teammate do anything to defend me?
They can dash into those players and stun them,
Okay.
or kind of just like block where they're gonna hit, so get stunned themselves.
So I'm curious, as you've played this, like what is strategy to do well? Like if you sit down as a team, what results in like, yeah, we're totally gonna like destroy the other team with our play style?
Generally, what we've noticed is it's teams that are willing to run interference for each other. So through several other games, you'll hear people be going like, cover me, or, block for me. And so that's a lot more successful than just kind of like running around and not communicating. But we also don't want too much communication between players so they can actually focus on playing. So.
Well, and I sort of asked the question because you have what is effectively a relatively complete world right now, right? You can play this beginning to end. You have the ability to like win or lose. You've got all 4 players in place. You got all the basic mechanics. There's like a little bit of things to think about and polish, but for the most part, you've got something you can play and assess like how to make it better. And the fact that it's cooperative competitive is really, really good. Like that's a strong way to get guests invested. Like competitive is good for balance. Like, player versus player like is a nice symmetric way to like make something interesting. Like humans will bring their own goals and interest curve and desire to defeat the other person. So like that's going to give you pretty strong engagement. And then the idea of cooperation opens up the door for good cooperation, bad cooperation, and so like nice variability and like sort of tension between teammates of like, is this going to go well? So as you iterate this, the things to think about are, well, one, just like, what are you trying to get to? And I guess with what you've got, what do you think how do you see based on what you have, where you want to take this?
There were some UI updates that we want to do. For instance, we noticed like as we were playtesting it, people weren't looking at the dash timer that's around the button because you're looking at the field. So we want to do some more character art to make that a little more obvious when your dash is ready. I think we kind of also wanted to do it so that maybe if like a parent is playing with a child and maybe the child isn't so skilled at the game, that it would still be something that like they could be successful at. So that's going to be like a lot of balancing that we've got to do through a lot of playtesting.
Yeah, I was also considering like adding like slight differences in adding like power-ups or adding like differences for characters, or yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we want to try out and try and tweak, as well as like scoring. As we've been noticing, as we want to see like as we play whether or not like draws happen too much, because that's not quite satisfying.
And I think this all speaks to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, also one of the, I think, major changes we're planning to do is not keep the ball a ball. So yeah, we're gonna iterate on to make that more, a storytelling element.
Gotcha.
And one other thing too is we're considering adding whenever you bring the ball back to base that it's like stays there and a new one spawns in the middle. That way it feels more like you're collecting items versus just like kind of scoring in like soccer.
And so those are some good things to think about because like if they stay in my base it's possible I could steal them from you. And one thing I would encourage is right now the world, every new ball drop is effectively the same. So like the play experience looks like it's going to be fairly consistent as like this sort of like the same experience over and over again. And I would encourage you to think about how do you get sort of an interest curve built into the structure of this. So the beginning is like possibly in this format, but then something changes and it escalates, and then it changes again and it escalates again. So I would look at how to get a more designed interest curve into this rather than just relying on competition. Then the other piece of that is how do you make the ending exciting? It's always the challenge in competition. Like you want it to be fair and natural, but you also want something exciting to happen at the end. And so can you make this, like possibly give a team like big risk reward choices at the end? Like you're kind of desperate and you need a big scoring shift, so you go for this and it may not pay off. Or like there are bonuses that come out near the end that are pretty disruptive and like they change things. And if you're good at playing defense, you can survive them, but there are choices. And I think that's where I would like put all these ideas through is like, what is the interest curve? How do these changes like help get you to a more compelling interest curve? And then watching that sort of the balance and the sense of, it builds to an exciting end that is about one team winning. How do you get there in your choices?
One other thing is, what are your thoughts on adding like a variety of characters that players can choose from that have different like stats, so to speak, so like different speeds and different recharges?
It's often a challenge to give the guest a choice at the beginning that doesn't have meaning yet. Things you can do is not give them the choice and they just like, there are 4 characters here and the teams are different. And it's about like finding that balance. It's good to have asymmetry because it can generate discussion and it can cause teams to have different strategy. The one thing to watch out for as well is those choices exist but don't really have a lot of true meaning. So you can have a character that has more speed, but it's kind of hard to tell in the moment that speed is really a big difference. So if you do make asymmetric character choices, they should be really obvious. And a good way to design them isn't like, what can we tune and change? It's what strategies do we want guests to use? So if you give them different characters, what you're really giving them are different strategies. So don't just give them characters, like be like, okay, you're going to be going for the speedy strategy. You're going to go for the slow but powerful defensive strategy. And that might push you to be like, okay, we have 2 teams, and each team is made up of sort of like defender and an attacker. And now you've got sort of like character differences that are prompting the guests to think about how they play. And that's the strongest way to think about characters is they are ways to guide the play of the guests. And they're guiding the play in a way that fits the sort of, the interest curve you want to build. It's similar to power-ups. Like if you have things that show up, like you are doing that not because you can, but because it's about suggesting strategy and sort of like adding in moments that are important to the interest curve. So I would filter everything through that idea of strategy. And like your goal is interesting strategy. So strategy that causes interesting choices later. Like, oh, do I defend or do I attack? What do we do in this moment? Like we have a lead. How do we protect the lead? What's the strategy for that? Oh, we are behind. How do we change our strategy to get ahead? And possibly strategies that are asked to adapt. So the game changes. And so now you have to like deal with this new variable, and does that change your strategy? Or does your strategy become more nuanced and things like that? But the fact that you're in a place where you have the basic structure, you can play it, you can sort of see like what are our strategies, look for dominant strategies like, oh, it turns out if I do this over and over again, it's a good way to go. Those are things to like also watch for an iteration, but you're in a good place. So like keep playing it, play test with other people, and find ways to make it sort of a more complete, interesting curve and you'll be in really good shape.
Yeah, thank
Sure.
you.
All right, next up is Team 75.
Hello, everyone. We are the team 75. I'm the producer and artist, Zizhuo. This is Ivy, the other artist, and this is Chaoli and Jingyu, our amazing programmer, and this is our great sound designer, Peter. And our games is about making robots. Yeah. And Jingyu gonna talk about more about the design.
So this is basically a physics-based sandbox game where you make your own robots and compete with other players to see how far you can go with your robot design.
And how do we play it?
You'll play with just like keyboard and mouse.
Should I go over and try it?
Yep.
And there's also a microphone input.
Yep. There's also microphone input after you finish the design of your robot. So it's like driven by the sound input.
So if you shout out loud, it might go faster or might not.
Shout for the robot to make it go fast. All right.
So you hold right click and drag to change camera angle.
All right, so I can do that. Ooh, there we go.
Yes. And you use left click to select different components from the left side of the screen. And then you press left click to.
And I'm already seeing like, it looks like the ghost of the part goes red when I can't do it, and it goes green when I can fit it.
Yep.
It's a little bit of like casting onto the thing. Nice.
Up, down, left, right, rotate it.
Oh, and I can rotate. So first question, what is this part I'm using? Is there anything to help me with that? It looks like it's just a connector.
Yes.
All right. All right, I can put wheels on this. I can go like. Do wheels. All right, I'm gonna just run it, right?
Yep.
What happens?
You can undo.
It works.
So all these obstacles are blocking your way. You should probably consider adding more destructive components.
Oh man, wait, I want to get back to my What are these other things here? Something evocative options. Okay, let's go. So I put a drill on here, and then and what is the jetpack here?
Jetpack is like putting like into the or
Oh, okay. It's like what's a jetpack? Like a rotate machine does? What's the rotate button?
Yep, it's either direction or velocity.
Anyway, yeah, let's talk about this. So yeah, this is a wildly ambitious world. This would be a world that if you talked to me a week ago, I would have told you not to do it. But you clearly have something working here. I mean, like audience reaction, there's enough, even with these simple parts, the course layout, like there's enough anticipation about what might happen that you've got definitely something to build from. And I think the real questions are like, okay, how do you bring this into the festival format? And what is the sort of like the complete picture of this? So when you think about sort of like festival for this, what comes to mind? Like how do you imagine this being a guest experience?
So we started, our initial thought it's just like everyone can go in, make their own robots, and test it out to see like what final score they can get. And we have like a leaderboard, so everyone want to look at other people's design and try their own sort of experience.
Okay. And I mean, I think one thing to consider is the audience in this. And there is definitely something about making the choices and having sort of like the audience watching that in anticipation. Like the loop of this is interesting, right? Like I'm adding things. There's enough understanding of the parts. I think you want to iterate that. I think you want the parts to sort of like signal their purpose so that when I add things, like people watching it can understand kind of like what's happening. And that loop of building and then like, will it work? And then the payoff of it working, I think would be an important thing to get for an audience. And I think from there, it's a question of like, you could just do what we did here, right? I'm working here, but the audience can watch me work, and you can sort of see that whole loop. You could also think about, is it multiplayer? Like, you're watching two guests build at the same time, and they're going to be going together? Like, the anticipation of this is, ultimately, what will this vehicle be challenged against, right? And so right now the world says it's going to be challenged against just sort of this like test track. And you're talking a little bit about like, it can be tested against other things people made, right?
Yeah.
That's not, like, I think if you want that to work, you need to make that more present and more visible. So is it like, am I strategizing around that? Like, am I building with that in mind? Is it really just distance, and is it just a high score? And the one thing, I think if you go multiplayer, like basically two guests at the same time, in fact, they don't even have to be, like you could do this like unnetworked multiplayer, like two stations that just are going at the same time. You could have a whiteboard where you write down the times and you declare a winner in the moment. But you could basically set the stakes to be more immediate. The challenge of the winner of like the one who's been doing the best so far is they may not even be present. And so it's a victory in the sense of like, I defeated someone who's really good. But in terms of like being in the moment, in the space, that is a little bit disconnected. So I would think about how do you get the energy and the interest of this world to be very present in what you're doing? And then how do you sort of like, how do you capture that and focus on that while also iterating this a little bit, but not going too crazy? The danger is you could just keep adding stuff to this, and it's unclear what adding stuff will do to make it better or worse. You could have, you have 5 parts. You can go to 10. You can go to 20. You can go to 50. And variety is definitely a dimension of this. But I think the other thing to look at is, what do people want as they're playing this? And is there like a design pattern that you want to design for? So I played this, and I did some really natural things. Like you told me there are wheels. I put wheels on it because the track says move forward. It fell over, so I then went to stability. And so as you play test this and play this, you'll probably see those patterns. Consider designing for those patterns. Like, do you want a different pattern? If you have guests watching this, and then they go play it, they're going to have a different pattern as well. And that's the other thing to watch for. So you've got potentially two really different play styles for this. One is I have no idea what I'm doing, and I explore it on its own terms, pretty much as a naive guest. And the other one is I just watched someone do it, and they got this score. I'm going to sit down and try to beat them. I'm going to build from what I saw, and I'm either going to have like a similar strategy and I'm going to like make it better, or I've got a different strategy in my head. So there's a very good chance that the real play of this is guests jumping in, having watched it, knowing the parts and knowing the interface reasonably well just by seeing it, and then jumping with their first test being somewhat advanced. And so I think that's the thing to know and get ready for. Obviously, like the first guess might not be in that category, so you do want the test and strategize thing. But I think there's a lot of decisions you can make about how do you set like a timer, how do you set a goal, how do you set that context to make the building be motivated and sort of like compact. Like how do you get that? How do you get sort of like a really tight building, iterating, and hopefully final success interest curve through this? And that's going to come from, is it one guest? Is it two guests? Is it a head-to-head competition? Is there a really clear like definition of success on the track? All those little bits. But you're in a really strong spot. Like it's working. Like the interface for this is like these are hard to do. And so the stuff you're doing in terms of snapping, the red-green feedback, all that visualization, like it's working well. I think there's definitely some things about drills and cannons and jets that are exciting, but the intuition for them is like needs to be tweaked.
Yeah, so our hope is that all those components will have like clear mechanics, but there should be some unconventional ways you can use it. So for example, like for the cannon, you can use it to like destroy those obstacles, but you can like put it backwards to use the recoil to like push you forward.
Yeah, and so I think clarity and simplicity for the parts, because you'll get complexity when the guests put them all together. So you don't want any one part to be too complicated. But really, I think design out your festival execution and then iterate with that in mind. And then at the same time, iterate the parts and the flow of this. And you're in a strong space.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Good work.
All right, next up is Team 82. This is a demo drum world, so we'll be showing their video.
Hi, we're Team 82, and I'm Inchen, the producer and sound designer. Jennifer and Bokang is our board programmers, and Zongze and Jinyuan our artist.
All right, let's watch it.
Watch it.
Start.
That's our gameplay.
At the beginning, I was wondering, like, with the two spheres, like, is this it? And it was then, like, the world started for real. And I was like, oh, no. Like, Yeah, it was just a simple tutorial, and then it like got into this really interesting space. Man, the interaction you built is pretty unique for the JAMA drum. Like the idea of sort of like reaching out and grabbing things, and then sort of fighting over it. Like it feels like a mechanic that works pretty well. The fighting moment, talk me through that. What exactly are the guys doing? Are they spinning?
Yeah, it depends on the spin speed.
Okay.
We have kind of. I want to explain.
Yeah, the fast you rotate the spinner, and it has a time, maybe 3 seconds, and who rotates fast, who will win.
Yeah, there's a little like meter that sort of like lets you know. So I guess the way it works then is it's a timer, and whoever has the majority has pulled it kind of onto their side wins. So it's not. My first expectation was it would be the person who successfully pulls it all the way to their side, but it's actually more of a timer-based thing. So it's not you tug until someone wins. It's you trigger a little showdown and a timer goes off. Okay. I mean, stuff that's really nice about this. I like the visual style, like sort of like space art themed, works really well. It's just sort of a nice, like the background lets us focus on the stuff in the middle. It's not distracting, but it sets a good sort of like sci-fi context. And I guess looking at this, are we a giant robot?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're a giant robot with giant hands, and we're gathering planets?
Yeah.
All right. What are we doing with the planets? We like to have planets?
It's like our next step plan is to like you're collecting the planets to charge your weapon.
Okay.
So you can actually shoot the other robot. Yeah, destroy your enemy. So.
All right, you have a little bit of a weird story here, like giant planet-scale robots that are trying to destroy each other. I mean, and be careful about getting too weird, because you want clarity at the end. But like the things that are really, really good, like the different sized planets, I'm guessing are different points, effectively. So the big ones are worth more, small ones are worth less. And it seemed like the big ones, I pulled them back in more slowly.
Yeah.
So really, already good, like risk reward. Like, do I go for the small ones? When do I go for a big one? Like maybe when they're distracted, pull it in. Well, they can't counter it. So you've got already good balance of this where I'm looking at this and I can imagine the guests like thinking, right? They are thinking about what moves to make and when to make them, which is really good. I think this has a feel of strategy. And like you have a nice escalation. Like you get to that final like one big planet, and it's like everyone knows what's happening right there, right? Like you've done enough like to set up the idea that this is about trying to get the big planets and get a lot of points, but also fighting over them. So seeing one big one is like, oh yeah, like what are we gonna do? We're gonna fight. And so I think you've got strong interest curve going on there. The one thing to watch is how to make that moment of fighting like really central to I think the feel of this. And we got stuff happening in a second. And the thing I would worry about, one, it gave me like strong like mental flashbacks to some scars I have from playing Mario Party, and like just like going all in on speed and physical of like defeating something. So be careful with the spinners. I don't know if you look at the JAMA drum here, you can sort of see it here. See this little piece of rubber? That's there because there were, I don't know if anyone ever broke their fingers.
Actually, yesterday, Ferris hurt his finger, so.
Yeah, so if you spin the wheel really fast and then try to stop it, momentum will carry your fingers and you go, poof, and it basically gets slammed into the table. And so those are rubber bumpers to kind of sort of prevent that. So be gentle with the guests. Like we don't necessarily want to encourage injuries, but I think more to the point, I would think about a way, can you make that moment sort of more exciting? Right now it's very mechanical, and not because you haven't because it's a bad design. It's clearly like, it's very functional, right? The UI is just a meter and things like that. So I would look at how do you make those, the winner feel like they won. And I think the thing to watch for is it feels, question I would have is, does someone feel like they can win even if they've been losing a lot of them? Like, it's something that there is, it feels fair, I think is the thing to aim for. And particularly, one of my questions is there any advantage or difference on attacker versus defender? So for instance, there's a like the way you trigger this, right, is someone's grabbed a planet, and then I go and try to take it from them. And it feels like, I think I would want that moment to have some good clarity of, I pulled it from you or I kept it. And some of this might just really be signaling and messaging, like, you know, a little bit in the moment with the UI and the effects and the sound effects of like who won. But I think I would want that to be a moment in this world.
Yeah, we're thinking of like shooting laser beams to each other, like they're kind of another conflict zone. And if you got more energy, there's more possibility for you to win and destroy the enemy robots. So there will be a moment for the winner, like shooting laser beams to destroy the enemy.
I would be careful about laser beams because one of the things that you probably already seen with the Jamma Drum is the guest's attention is very focused. So you can't really see the whole thing. I guess the thing, maybe here's the thing I was reacting to. You've got this moment of like tension, right? I'm pulling. I expected it to snap. So what it looks like happens is like I grab it and then just gets pulled back in at normal speed. And I think instead of it being I'd expect it to be a victory moment and like to sort of like jerk back and possibly be, you know, a different pacing of how I bring it in. I would want to sort of see it and play it, like to see really the feel of this. This is mostly a game feel question of like, how does it feel like I just battled someone and then I just won? I think that's what I'm sort of getting at is like, how to get that to feel like the world says it should feel.
Yeah, maybe tear enemy apart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing to think about is just like, what is the fantasy of this and the fiction of it? What does the world say is happening? And then how do you make the visuals sort of like pay that out? Like, I just did this thing. What do I expect to be the conclusion of that? But overall, I think the general structure, the mechanic is really interesting. You're doing this escalation. I would watch in your playtesting and you're playing of it as a team, like how do you sort of like find the parts you like a lot? And how do you sort of like amp that up, make that more exciting? The one thing, like I said, it's kind of hard to tell from a video, but it feels like the play might be a little lower energy than you want it to be. And so I think about just the general energy of the play space. The idea of like, you know, we both go and help each other, I think that'd be one thing I'd try to design for. Like, how do you get more guests to team up and like work together? And I think that might be a thing to fit in between the final moment. Is like, is there a level design that encourages more sort of like teamwork escalation? But really, tutorial to the general layout to like a teamwork phase to a final showdown. And if you can make that showdown feel really strong, I think you're in a really good spot. It's like, it's got nice theming. You've got a weird story, like, but in a way that can be exciting. Like you've got robots and possibly lasers and explosions. Your world doesn't need a deep story. So just know where your guests are. Your guests are two guests fighting two other guests, trying to get the highest score and trying to win. And so you want the clarity. I think having one robot get destroyed at the end totally makes sense. I don't need to know it was because I used the planets to fuel up my laser and then I zap the other guy. But if you give me a big explosion, I'll be happy. So I think just lean into like where the guest is in the moment, like the emotions and the excitement, and just make it exciting.
Cool. Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Team 77.
And it looks like we have alligator clips, foil, and makey.
Yeah. So hey guys, we're Team 77, and our producer, sound designer, and programmer, Shuna, Echo as our artist, and also Abby, our programmer, Amber, another programmer, and me, Glennon, the artist. And yeah, our game is basically four people's game. Like 2 people are playing horses, and 2 are players. So yeah, we need 4 testers.
Yeah, could you be the host player?
Oh wait, there's the shares over here. Okay, so just oh my gosh, for context, man, this is so makey. I love the fact that you made your own wire. I mean, do I have to hold on? Is that like to hold on to, or is that?
No.
Is it just because you didn't have enough wire?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay,
and
all right.
we just made like a one common earth panel. So
Yeah, no. Like, of course, twisting foil together.
Yeah.
It's a wire. Put foot here.
So basically, what's going to happen is one player is going to be the horse, and one player is going to be the person riding the horse,
All
who's
right.
going to stand behind.
All right.
Not actually ride the horse, but yeah. So there's going to be 2 lanes in the race. So if you keep tapping on the left one, you keep running in the left lane. If you tap on the right one, you keep running in the right lane.
Okay.
So you could just be like this and then move over to the right if you want to switch.
And is there? My first thing on like feet would be to like alternate.
Yeah.
Is that a good or bad thing?
Right now, I mean, it won't matter, like you'll move the same time. So basically, on
Right.
both the sides, there are fruits. So the player standing behind, they have to grab the fruits.
Okay.
And when they grab the fruit, you get a boost.
All right. I'm sure it'll all make sense when we get in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do this. I've missed makey. There, I will admit, BBW makey has acquired a nickname, which is Flaky. But mainly because it's generally held together with like tape and foil, and sometimes those connections fail. But it's good to see. Well, when we get to festival, we can talk more about how to make sure that guests don't break your stuff. But for right now, like this is exactly the level it should be at. Yeah. Woo! All right. I'm the cat, right?
Yeah. No, you're the horse, I'm the cat.
All right. So I don't get any credit for winning, like the cat team. All right. Some really good things. Like this is super high energy, right? Like this is. And when we think about festival, like that's kind of what you want. There's a little bit of like when you think about spectators and worlds, if you can turn the guests who are playing the world into part of the thing you're watching, then you're doing some really good things, right? So this is half about what's happening up here and half what's happening down here. And I think like owning that and knowing that's going to be really important moving forward. The foot stuff works. I decided to go for like, this is clearly like a button tapping world. It's like all about how fast can you tap the button. There's a little bit, and I guess from my perspective it was button tapping. From the rider's perspective, there's activating the fruit.
Yeah.
I will admit, like playing it, I sort of felt a mix of like understanding it and not really feeling like I had enough agency to do the strategy you wanted me to do. And it felt like the strategy was decide, like get to the fruit, as efficiently as possible, while also moving forward as fast as possible. And I think half of this was the visuals put the fruit farther away than sort of made sense visually for me. And so I intellectually knew there were 2 lanes and I should get to the side, but it was really hard for me to tell what being close enough meant. And given that uncertainty, I was like, well, I know one thing, which is the faster I tap, the faster I go. And so I'm just gonna go for tapping. And then I was like, you know what? I'm guessing it's like just number of taps. So I am faster with 2 feet than 1 foot. And so I was like, I'm just gonna alternate and like just go for that. And so it was a little bit of me like rapidly going through like, how does this work? And what does it mean? And I'm guessing a little bit of that means that the strategy between the 2 guests is a little disconnected. I'm being asked to do something that's very, very overwhelming sort of cognitively. Like I'm just like, all I do is tap as fast as I can. I can't really in that moment then strategize too much about getting to fruit. And I think that's I guess a question for like how you want this to be built out. How much do you want the guests working together? And how much of this do you sort of want like horse against horse and then rider against rider and not really it be a team thing?
So one thing we wanted to do was add obstacles to the course.
Mm-hmm.
The horse. So we wanted to add obstacles to the course as well, so that the horse player also has, incentive to basically change lanes more.
Okay.
And then we want we were thinking of maybe adding like a penalty or something if they tap the fruit on the wrong time, basically, so that they have to kind of be in sync. So they tap only when they actually reach the fruit.
So certainly we will have more kind of level stuff to make sure that there are different kind of fruits and different kind of obstacles for players to overcome. And also the fruits, because right now we only have 2 kinds of, maybe there will be some kind of, Ivy said, penalty ones.
Yeah, and I think the thing to watch out for is the way the player with the feet plays this and the way the guests who are using the pads up here to play this is fairly independent. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's fairly independent is because I'm so focused on speed that's my strategy. And so if you want, in this moment, you wanted to connect me to the person up here, you'd have to give me directions around speed. So like the way I'm thinking about this is like, what would the guests say to each other? Like, what is the communication you would like to have happen? And I can imagine in this, be like, hey, go to the left to get the apples. Like, I need to get the apples, so go this way. And I could sort of see that being a way the strategy goes. But it had to be, if you think about that, then you have to like make it a very like big, broad decision choice of like, okay, we're gonna like focus on speed, but now we're gonna switch and go over here and then focus on speed again. And I think that's one thing to look at is what are the guests saying to each other? And within all of this, I've got speed and direction controls. I can sort of look up as well and see like where the fruit is. If you really want choices to be made about getting closer to fruit, I think the pattern of the fruit has to be different. Right now, it felt like there was a lot on both sides, and it was like, I can't choose. Like, what does that mean? So I think you'd want to clarify steering strategy, and then I would want clarity of, is there any decisions to be made about speed? Like, do I actually want to slow down at points? It's a little bit weird to have 2 feet places, but then only use one of them. Yeah. Like, that's just a weird control for the fiction that we got going on here. And so I could almost see something where I don't control steering, I just control speed, or there's like a move I can use with 2 feet. Like, for instance, if you put jumping in, like jumping might be both feet at the same time. Or some other way to use these controls. So I think what that sort of gets to is, can you design the controls, iterate the controls to sort of fit the fiction a little better? Yeah. And then think about how you want the 2 guests to interact. And a good way to think about that is like, what do you want them to say? Like, is this about, hey, slow down, I need to do this? Is it like, watch out, this is happening? Is it get ready for this? So like the idea of them working together, I think, is an important thing to get to. It doesn't need to be a lot. In fact, it doesn't even need to be something that people actually say, but it's a good way as a team to articulate, like, what are we designing for? Like, and you're implicitly designing for some cooperation here. And I think this will feel best when the guests feel connected. If you have a guest who's like heads down and just like doing it, like that's fine. But from a design perspective, you do want some thought of like, what does it mean to work together? And I love the fact this is a super simple level. It's probably a little short for what you're building to, but you don't need a lot. I think what you want is possibly a level that's maybe twice as long, that has like a couple like phases to it. So I wouldn't design multiple levels. I would design a single level with multiple phases in it. And within that, I would think like the beginning is we as a team get used to the controls. And then like the middle is, okay, now we use the controls and feel like we're kind of good at this. And then the end is, it's got like a different little twist to make it exciting. And this gets to the last part, which is the connection between the two racers. I love the fact that you have this little meter at the top to let me see like how close we are. And like that's really helpful. It is a lot to take in. Like if I am like watching my feet and I'm watching the fruit and I'm watching the meter up there, it's a lot to like register, but it's good to have that there. So when I want to check it, I can check it. And that's the last little question is, how do you get this to be an exciting race all the way through? And that's where I look at the power-ups, and especially sort of the end. Like, is there a choice that we as a team can make if we're behind that would help us possibly get at least close to winning? And is there a choice that we as a team might make, given that we're far ahead, that we would do? And that usually gets down to risk. Like, I would expect like the last stretch of this to possibly have risky options. And so if I'm ahead, I might play it safe. And it's a slower way to go, but it's safer. And if I'm behind, I mean like, okay, we're gonna try for the risky thing. And if we do it right, we can get ahead. And if we fail, we just lose by a lot. But that could be a good, exciting moment to bring it to a conclusion. But yeah, like overall, like any world that has like people pounding their feet and like hitting tables in a really physical way is nice and exciting. And I think it's going to be a possibly really exciting thing for a festival.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Good work.
All right, next up is Team 78. Please give us a bit of time to clear up the front. This is a Jamo Drum World, so we'll be showing the video.
Hi, we are Team 78. I'm Yigang, the producer and sound designer. Our solo programmer, Rohit, and our great artists, Eliza and Anran.
All right, I think I got most of this. One, it's adorable. I love the visuals. Like I think are we? It's a little tough from the video. Are we like little Santas?
Yeah. And we are trying to get as many presents as we can in a snowball fight. And there's a snowball, then you can throw at others and turn others into snowman, and they will be frozen for like 3 seconds.
Gotcha. And that was the thing I was struggling to see was like I noticed on the pads like the snowball symbol and it would recharge, but it was hard for me to see like if there was throwing happening. And I kept wondering like it looks like the players get transformed and they turn into like stationary like snowmen like things. And so it sounds like the way that you play this is you steer, like your character is always moving forward, which works really well, and I try to gather presents. And then I can sort of launch a snowball basically straight ahead of me. And if I hit another guest, they get sort of stuck. They turn into a snowman. And there's some look like there's some fences in the way. There's like some obstacles.
Yeah, just to make the games harder. Maybe we'll add more like interest curve stuff later on. But.
And it felt like there was another transformation going on, or was there no? Is it only just snowman? You turn to snowman.
Just like one snowman.
Okay. I mean, the basic, like I said, the art and the theming is really cute. It's going to be, seasonal for the festival, and it has a nice sort of friendly vibe. Like the tone isn't like aggressive. We're trying to kill the other Santas. It's sort of like, yeah, we're running around gathering presents. I love the fact that it's a small thing, but like the presents have some little physics and they sort of bounce a little bit when they land. And like the play space really does embrace the theme in a really strong way. The music, the light sort of like winter Christmas style music is really good. And like you point out, like I think it's obviously too long right now. Like the music actually dies out a little bit. It's like, and then it sort of kicks back in. And it's like, ooh, yeah, still going. But like you're in a great place now to iterate the feel of this. And I think it's interest curve is the big one of like how do you get this to build? And watching it like this had sort of a classic challenge, which is one guest had a large lead, and it was kind of like just like that lead stayed in place the whole experience. And I think that's one thing to think about is how do you get sort of like keeping things closer? How do you get 4 guests? You like want this balance of like there's skill, and if you're good at this, you're going to win. But it's not so like clear that you're just going to constantly defeat everyone over and over again, and there's no competition. You want people to win, but it to be close.
Yeah,
it's sort of like your target.
The last 10 seconds or 20 seconds, if the least scored guy would grow bigger or getting more ability or skills compared to others too.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like this is where it gets interesting. And I love, like we've sort of been talking about already, like the idea of strategy. I love like the idea of strategy to guide your design. And so the last 20 seconds, imagine you've got, the different guests in different positions, right? They have different scores. What strategies should they adopt? And a bad situation is the strategy is give up because there's no way they can win. Like mathematically, in the last 15 seconds, there's no way you're going to get enough presents to win. And if you're in the lead, you can give up too because mathematically there's no way someone can defeat you. So you can imagine scenarios and then use that to think about, okay, if that's what happens, how do we change that? So things that sometimes happen. If I'm losing, can I interfere with like the 2 leaders and kind of like help someone beat the other person? So sometimes we see worlds where there's a way to provide a little bit of like offense, and I'm not going to win, but you, the person who's in the lead the whole time, this other person's gaining on you, and I'm just going to like spam snowballs at you, and I'm going to like interfere with your victory. And that could be a strategy. And so using those different moments and thinking about where the guest is in the play can help you decide what power-ups would be helpful. And there's a little bit of math here, right? Like how many points do you want guests to be separated by at the end? What kind of swing do you want? A dangerous thing to do is like have like the one final present And at the end of the day, it's worth so many points. It doesn't matter what happened in the rest of the game. Like the person who gets that present wins. And that can feel unfair. It can feel like the rest of the experience didn't play into it. So there's definitely balance to watch for in how to make it competitive, but also feel fair.
So like we are trying to do like a negative feedback loop, like they have in Mario Kart, where like maybe like you mentioned, the player who's losing, they get some power-ups or boost, or maybe there's like a frenzy of gifts falling, like something like that, or maybe a person gets unlimited snowballs, can just like shoot people, throw at people.
Yeah, and I think what I would advise for this is think about what you want, like the technical implementation you want, and then how do you make that clear to the guest? Because the thing that's dangerous is you do something that's like, and actually Mario Kart does this. Like, if you're losing, like they give you better items.
Yeah.
They didn't really tell you that. There's no like, oh, hey, like you're gonna get good stuff, but you just know from playing over and over again that if you're in the lead, you're gonna get bananas, and if you're in last place, you're gonna get bullet bills and blue shells. So you want clarity. You want the guests to know what is happening and how to be ready for that, because you might give the player who's in last place good stuff, but they might never feel it, and it might never actually make them feel like they have a chance to win. Another way to go is to make success be a bit of a burden. So we see things like where you get bigger and slower, and you become an easier target. A lot of things we see sometimes in balancing stuff like this is when you get hit, you lose, like your presents fall out, and the more presents you have, the more fall out, and so you lose more. And so there's like, when you're low, like hitting someone who's in last place doesn't really do much. There's no reward for like getting what they lost. But man, going for the person who's in first place, they've got all like the extra presents. Like, let's go after them. And so you can sort of use the incentives of the game to encourage guests to do certain things. I think it's a question for this is, how much do you want this to be about, I'm just good at gathering, and I can sort of like use the snowball to like slow players down, or there is like sort of an escalation of, yeah, the green player, they're in the lead, let's go after them. Like, let's really focus on that. And that can be a good way to shift the experiences, letting sort of the guests strategize and think about what they want to do. And that gets to the question of like strategy. How do I get into the lead? And I think half of this is a little bit be better, like gather the presents faster. But if I'm in last place, I'm probably struggling with that right now. And so I would encourage like another way to get into the lead, and that might be by targeting the guest who's in first place. And you already have an offensive component to this, so that might be a good thing to like layer on top of is how do you make guests use that in a way that can sort of like balance out the competition. But overall, like you're in a great place. You have the world is playable. You can already start to feel like where it's fun. The visuals are really solid. Watch for a little bit of clarity. I think for the most part, you can tell the standards apart. It does seem like the colors are a little, like just looking at it, like some of them are a little visually.
Yeah, it's not, I think we have to like increase the intensity of it.
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of like things to iterate. Be aware, Jam and Drum, like people rarely look at the pads. There's a good chance that people just like spam the pad trying to throw a snowball when they can't until it finally happens. So you might need to put a charging meter on the player as opposed to the pad. But overall, like think interest curve, think strategy, but mostly like just play this. Like build this in a way that it's fun to play and you make it more fun to play.
Thank you.
Good work.
Next up is Team 79.
Hi guys, we're Team 79. Alexa and Phoebe are our programmers, and Lori is our sound designer. Sherry and I are the artists. So our world consists of 3 mini games, but today we're going to show 2, and it requires 4 players working in pairs to compete with each team. Yeah, we're using Makey Makey. I think we're ready. Who else wants to play the game?
Yeah. The idea of like put your fingers here is an ominous like. Do I really want to put my fingers there?
Yeah.
I'll be okay. That's it. Do I get a teammate, or am I doing this solo? All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we're good.
Okay. The first one is everyone needs to put one finger on that for and for while playing, and that one is like click and up and down and left and right. One in charge of left and right, one in charge of like up and down.
And we need to look at the screen too, I imagine.
Yes. You need to look at this way. Maybe read the instructions first.
Click any button to start.
Choose the fastest one.
Wait, which one are we? Over here. Click. Can we move up? Come on. Oh no. Come on, apples. Yay. All right, we'll do it. Oh, that was close. Well, like our certain. Which one are we? No! Oh, but we picked one. Big wheel, click the button to stop the wheel, get discount, any button to start.
The first one is the pink one.
Just clicking. I think just click the button.
I don't know who was.
Do I want a high number or low? I think I want high.
That's not. I don't think it's that. I think it's lower.
All right.
I'm not very good at this.
7 times 3.
Very good, 21%.
Discount.
More. All right. Woo. Yay. Oh. Oh.
I guess it's 3 rounds.
Oh.
Versus 64.
Do we just win straight up? Oh no, we. Oh no. Nice. Nice. There we go.
Yeah, that's not us.
Whew.
Got one.
Right. So do you want to talk a little bit about the bigger context? You're going to build another mini game. And I guess, how do you picture this sort of being implemented for festival?
So our theme is Black Friday sale. We have 3 mini games. The first one is get the product. The second one is choose the line, and the third one is getting the discount. So they're shopping related game, and we're thinking to let the player working in a team of 2 and compete with each other to provide a social experience.
And the interface right now is sort of like a little makey keyboard with buttons. So I mean the idea of like a bunch of little games and it being sort of team versus team is really appealing. I think it uses the festival idea well. Like it basically, it's always good to sort of like create this immediate social dynamic, right? Like you're my teammate and you're my enemy, and we're going to try to win. And then if we have an audience, there's an idea of like watching and sort of rooting. And there's, I think you're now tasked with designing for that dynamic, right? How do you sort of like reinforce the idea of being teammates, and how do you really emphasize competition? Right now, the games are both sort of like tests that we're not really fighting each other. It's sort of like test yourself. Can you get a high score? Who got the highest score? So I would watch that, and the dynamics of this is how do you get that feeling of competition? It's there because we're naturally competing, and I have a sense of like, okay, they got a high score, a low score, we just have to get this. So we're definitely feeding into the decision making, so like that back and forth helps. But I think it's a relatively low aspect of this at the moment. Like the idea of competing is not the primary thing that I'm thinking about. And then I think that part of that is the connection of this stuff. This feels somewhat disconnected. Like I did this and then this. And the thing that I'd worry most about is the scores and the competition, like just separating. And like that's especially given like there's an element of there's a little bit of skill on this as you learn to like judge the wheel and the lanes, but it's a big danger that by the end there's no more competition. And that's the thing, like as you do little things, that's probably could be the biggest downfall is you end up with something that started out exciting in a competition, but at the end it's just sort of like, well, like we know what's going to happen. And so I think predictability is sort of like your enemy here. I think like I said, the theming of this is really cute. I think it's really fun. I think just like the overall tone is really good. I think if you're going to go like this, I think you need to be much faster. I think you want to sort of like amp up that competition. I think you want it to be a bit more chaotic. If you look at, so like the classic examples I am familiar with are generally the Nintendo stuff. Like heads up, I play a lot of Nintendo. But there's Mario Party, which has a bunch of mini games, and then there's WarioWare, which has a bunch of mini games, and they have very different approaches. Mario Party, the mini games are often like to some degree skill based, and they're fast. You learn them quickly, and it's a competition. WarioWare, like it's all about like reaction and sort of like just pivoting from moment to moment. And I think I would think about this of like, how do you want the whole room to be reacting. And it is, you almost have a game show feel to this. And I think I would sort of like really lean into that vibe of this is like, who just won? Who's in the lead? You kind of want with that, almost like an announcer level thing. Like one way to think about this is, let's say one of you was the announcer for the room, right? You had a microphone and you were narrating what happens. One, what would you narrate right now? Like how would you build up the excitement? How would you explain to the audience and the spectators why this is exciting, what the stakes are, what's about to happen, what just happened? And how would you want that to be? Like, can you imagine what you would want to say? And if you sort of think in those terms, it can give you a sense of like, what do you want the overall flow of this to be? You know, when you get to the end, you want that last thing to be like, okay, it's down to this final competition. Like team A has a slight lead. They got to do this. If they can just barely hold on, then they'll be the winners. And that might be a good way to like mentally look at where you are with this and imagine what should we shift to like make that excitement even greater. And like that's basically like mapping out interest curve, but it might be a good approach. And you could literally per festival do someone who's the announcer. Like it would be challenging to make that built into the experience, like you record dialogue. But if you can use like your sense of the flow of this and what you want the audience to feel, like that might be a way to connect this together. And some of this is entirely made up, right? Like I'm fighting that team just because they're the other team. And one of the nice things about this, and this is sort of like in the minigame space, it's not a strong judgment on my skills and worth as a person. But like the fact that this is, you know, we're fighting over, you know, a fake discount around like apples and bananas and pears. Like at the same time, I can get into it, right? Like I want that other team to lose. Like I want to win this for no other reason than because I'm in the middle of this competition. And so I think playing up that energy, that emotion, while maintaining the fact that it's kind of silly, you can get the guests into that. But I think you need to like really embrace that. And so I think own the fact that this is like a cute, silly thing, but it is about competition. And you kind of want to get Team A to really hate Team B. And you want Team B to be like, no, we've got this. And I think if that's where you get to, you could have things that are almost random that really like bring out this moment. And in some sense, like you could think of this as an experience where it's a little game show and the audience is watching, the audience is rooting. You might split the audience. Like, okay, I mean, it's unclear how many people we'll have in the room. Like, well, that's a thing we'll cross. But like, you know, you got 2 people here, and then you've got some other guests. It's like, okay, you over here, you're rooting for Team A. You over here, you're rooting for Team B. Like artificial like competition the whole way, and just make it like people shouting at each other and people cheering, and that could be a really, really fun experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, good work.
All right, the next team is Team 84. This is a cave world, so we'll be showing their video.
Hi guys, we're Team 84, and I'm the producer and sound designer. And Shan and Taran are our programmers. Leah and Sandra are our artists. And our world is basically a Christmas theme racing game, but we don't have like the timer limit and the score yet. And the players can either be the Rudolph to control the speed and the direction, or the Santa to throw the snowball or the gift.
But looking at it, like, I love the visual style. Like, you've got, definitely have this, like, the aesthetics for the little houses, the decoration, the snow scene. Like, it's a really nice level of detail, but that adds room for clarity of, like, what we're seeing. It's really lovely. I don't know if it's just, like, the camera angle, but man, like, the idea of, like, aiming downhill, like, I want to get up there and see it, but it looks like it gives you a feeling of going downhill, which could be a really nice use of the cave. Are you tilting the base? Yeah. Okay, so we're like tilted, we're going down, and I think that, like, just capturing the feeling of being on a sled, going downhill, doing this stuff, feels like a really good direction to go in. It was definitely, like, just watching it, like, a lot of stuff was going on. So there's an aspect of, like, the balance of chaos and clarity. But from your description, I think the idea of, like, basically throwing presents, and then we're throwing them at the houses. Is that right? And then there's snowballs, and the enemies are snowmen. So I think just getting the challenge of the downhill feeling is, looking at this, it looks like the whole experience is very focused ahead of us. So everything's happening center screen, and there isn't a whole lot of room for, like, doing things on the sides, because you're gonna want this to have some feel of speed, which means, like, the people throwing are going to have to, like, really be anticipating, and it's sort of, like, gonna collapse their play space a little bit. And I think that's one little thing to think about is, where is everyone focused? And right now, I would watch out for everyone's focus is stuck in the middle, because that means all of the things that you're sending at the different guests are going to have to be there. And that might mean that different guests are looking for different signals. Like, if I'm steering, so, like, looking at this, like, the guest who's steering is using the DDR pad. What am I doing when I'm steering? Like, what is my strategy? Like, am I dodging things? Do I need to get close to houses? Am I picking things up? What am I looking at and focusing on?
I think the person who is in charge of steering the vehicles, his strategy will basically focusing on dodging the obstacles and maybe trying to speed up or slow down. Because if you speed up, it'll be much more difficult to hit the houses with your gift. But if you slow down, you have less chances to, encounter more houses.
Okay. So there's the person who's steering is controlling the pace.
Yeah.
Like, if you're talking about putting in a timer, there might be an idea that I have a limited amount of time, and the more I can get, the better.
Yeah.
At the same time, the trade-off on that is, if I go too fast, then it's harder to deliver presents, and it's harder to dodge things, which could be a good trade-off. When I dodge things, am I dodging the snowmen in addition to, like, the trees and other things?
Yeah, everything. But you can hit the snowman and delete it with the snowball. But we haven't, implement that function into our current version, but we will do it later.
Yeah, and so that might be a thing to, like, think about, is the different roles. You have effectively 2 roles, 3 guests, right?
Yeah.
The guests are both delivering presents, which is the core essential thing. Like, if we don't deliver presents, then we didn't succeed at all.
Yeah.
But we're also defending against the snowmen.
Yeah.
The person driving is steering, is also defending. Like, there's obstacles that they have to avoid.
Yeah.
And that overlap for the snowmen might be a challenge, because it might not be clear whose job that is. Is the person who's steering, is their job to dodge them, or the people who are delivering presents, is their job to hit them? And that might be good at times, but just watch for it. Okay. Like, that might just cause some expectations and some confusion in communication. And I think this is going to be a balance of each guest knows their role, and there's sort of like an interest curve for each guest. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing and how does that escalate? And then there's an overall interest curve about how this all comes together. And I think watching for, are they communicating? Like,
I think they can. Maybe, for example, the guy who is in charge of throwing gifts, maybe
he's like, wow, you're driving so fast. Could you slow down a little bit? Yeah, so I think they will communicate together.
And so an example of this would be, let's say, so you got snowmen in the front and they're coming at me. That signals, like if we look at the screen actually right now, there's a snowman and a tree.
Yeah.
The tree, I have to dodge because a snowball won't do anything against that. The snowman, I could either dodge it or hit it with a snowball. So it's kind of in a mixed space for the guest's attention.
Yeah.
If you had some snowmen ski up next to me on the sides and like kept pace, let's say they grabbed presents, then there's no amount of dodging that might get me away from those, and I have to address them with snowballs.
Yeah.
And so that just brings clarity of whose job it is and like where that balances out. And so that might be something to look at is, are there ways to look at the individual roles and see like how what they're dealing with, how that gives them like things that are in their own space to worry about that influence the whole overall experience and sort of like balance things across. And then you have things that are cooperative. Like, oh man, like there's a big snowman coming up. We have to hit it with snowballs. Stop delivering presents and focus, right? And so you can sort of think about moments where I've got a job and I'm doing it, and I'm doing it well. And there might be moments where we have to work together to manage something else. And that could be a good way to think about your interest curve is like you want moments where I'm escalating and sort of like managing my skill, but then bigger moments where we work together on something. And that might be, like I said, just a nice way to think about structure. And that might also help you pull things to the side.
Yeah, true.
Because I would guess that if this becomes very downhill focused, it might just be hard to visually separate things out and add variety. And so if you can get things to come a little bit to the sides, and maybe have things that happen in the air, that could be another way to get balance. But overall, I think you've got a really strong theme. It's going to be really good. I love the idea that there's sort of like this mission we have, and that's what we're trying to do. And there's obstacles that are preventing it, but we have super good clarity of our goal is to deliver presents, and like I think people will get that. And then it's mostly a matter of designing that track and that timing and that balance to make an interest curve that's really good. But you've got 3 guests, which is going to be really nice. And like I said, the visuals are already lovely. So yeah, like play this out, feel it, and think about those interest curves. And I think you're going in a great direction.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you. So the last team for the morning session is team 81. Please come on up.
Hi, we're Team 81, and I'm Cherry, the producer and the artist in the team, and Sarah is another artist, and Ferris and Lachlan are our programmer, and Max is our sound designer. So our game is a competitive game for 2 players, and our platform is MIDI keyboard. The white keys is for pushing the balls, and the black key is for attacking others' keyboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going against Fuji, am I?
The white one is for.
Oh, sorry, that's what that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a soccer pong game. There's a ball in the middle. You're
All
trying
right.
to score it past your opponent. Yeah.
As long as I don't have flashbacks to my piano lessons, we're in good shape.
One mechanic we haven't like visually communicated well yet is the black keys actually like they push the ball upwards, whereas this one like pushes it forwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Feel it out. Whoa. Which one am I?
You're on the bottom. Low keys are on the bottom, high keys are on top.
Was that good? Ah! Whoa. Ah. Come on. Ah. Are we? Let's wait to come back. All right. So talk us through what we were doing. So I felt I love the fact that this has nothing to do with playing music.
Yeah.
And it gets you a chance to like just smash the keyboard. And the thing I was wondering was the keys disappear up there. What's
right.
that?
The so your spells, the things you're shooting out of the keys, they move the ball, but they also destroy your opponent's keys, and that's how you score a goal. Is you have to make a hole in their
Gotcha.
defenses.
Yeah, one thing I should specify is, so you saw the keys were going blue. That's to indicate that the key is about to get hit, and if you press the key at that time, you can like cancel out the other spell. So our plan is actually, we just ordered an LED strip, which we're planning on like putting here, which then lights up the color of the note if it's in danger.
All right.
To add additional UI.
Good luck. Well, and so that's really strong, man. Like the visuals are already like set up in a relatively imposing, like there's cobra statues spewing fire, like which makes no sense, but it's cool. And so I was a little bit wondering, like, is the fire influencing the battle at all? So the space is really exciting. It screams like big, important like thing happening. It is definitely weird that it's like matching this idea of a keyboard, but the weirdness works. The playing it, the thing that it feels like right on the edge of is random chaos and intentional skill. And I came away, so here's my reaction. I'm not too sure what I would do differently playing it again. And I think that's the place, and some of that's lacking clarity. It's like exactly what was going on. And I think we were both tending towards a bit of a, like, you just got to keep hitting things. Were you going for a more intentional strategy?
So at first I tried to like have a strategy and just like push the balls that like push the keys that were that would like actually hit the balls. But then I realized I have big hands. What if I just press all the keys at once? I wanted to stay away from that because I felt like that was maybe not the most genuine strategy, but that's what worked and that's how I made like a 4-point comeback.
It sort of feels like spamming is right now the dominant strategy.
Yeah, we absolutely, I think we partially want to encourage like targeted spamming in a lot of ways, because like one thing is like you guys would pick areas of the keyboard which felt more relevant to where the ball was, but there's a lot of, the other thing is we do read how like hard the notes are pressed and actually kind of like support that, like we
The harder you hit it, the harder you hit the note, the faster the projectiles move, and the
Gotcha.
harder they hit the ball.
So it feels like some of this is like surfacing the reality, right? Bringing clarity to the guess of like what's really going on. So the idea that I can both hit the ball and hit the keys is like a little bit lost in what's going on. And that's all this is going to be around feedback. It's like clarity that key went away because it got hit by the opponent. Clarity that key didn't go away because you countered it. Clarity that shot was a powerful shot because you hit the key harder. That was a weak shot because you hit it more weekly. I would think one thing to watch for is there a way to bring in some balancing where if I can just like put my arm down and just like keep slamming the keys, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine sort of like an internal like energy system, which is in any given moment, you can only send out shots with a certain amount of energy. So like if you shoot out 20, it's going to dissipate each one a little bit. But if you like slam 3, like they can be like a really powerful shot. And you might be able to pull off some intuition around that. It sort of makes, it kind of, like intuitively, that's kind of what I expected was like, it seems like it would be unbalanced if I could just like use all the keys at once and get the same effectiveness as using one key at once. So I think look at a little bit of that. And then it's that clarity of like what's happening moment to moment. And so like the ball jumping way up in the air, I kind of got, because you told me that like the black keys launched them up, but there wasn't a whole lot explaining why it went so high or like things like that and what to do about it. And I wasn't even sure what the ball going up in the air meant in terms of gameplay.
It's more beneficial if you're on the defensive, because that way you can kind of get the ball over all the projectiles coming at you. But if you're on the offensive, you kind of want it to just be flat.
Yeah, and I think this is like the challenge is we got to the place where there's just a ton of projectiles, and so any meaning for any given projectile was lost. And so the idea of going over the projectiles wasn't really a thing because the field was just flooded with projectiles. So it's like, well, like it's in the air now. So I think that's like the next iteration is like tying these things together and bringing clarity so I know what's happening. I can sort of anticipate if I do this, this might happen. And then I see things and I understand that that's why that happened. And that sort of adjusts my strategy and what I look at. And then with that, I would wonder like, interest curve. Honestly, like, 5, like a best to whatever score worked pretty well. Like it added some drama. It's not always going to be the case. So I would think about what do you want in terms of like that interest curve. There were relatively fast rounds because it was just sort of going to score. Like that builds on the idea of Pong and just like working with that. I don't think it necessarily needs to change too much. If you really do make this feel like we have more control over like attack defense and each guest kind of goes through a learning curve of, oh, this is how to do it. I think that could be overall a really strong experience. But, I mean, in terms of novelty, like using a keyboard in this way is really cool. I think you've done a good job of mapping it abstractly to something, but also preserving the intuition. And so I would keep that going. I love the fact that it's basically pounding the keys as opposed to sort of like intentionally like finding the pieces. And I don't know about you, Ryan, but I didn't really look at the keyboard much at all. Like this was really about focusing up here, which is why I said, wish you luck with the LED strip. I'm skeptical the guests will look down there. And you might put a lot of effort into making something pretty that is just lost because the guest is very focused up here. So be careful with that. One thing that you might find more effective is putting the LED strip virtually at the bottom of my screen. And I can sort of mentally map that as like a signal device to where my hands are. That might be stronger than putting it down there. Because you're just going to have an attention fight between down here and up there. But yeah, I think iterate this, push on it. I will also say like the curve of the board felt a little weird. I didn't know what to do with it. Like it wasn't clear. Yeah, I think that just sort of fits back into a test for this is I lose and I want to play again, and I know what to do differently this time. And when I wasn't too sure exactly, like I said, related to like the ball going in the air, I wasn't too sure what it meant to like have the angled ones be firing. I think the form factor is going to be fine. It's just going to be bringing clarity to what does it mean to like choose to shoot from here versus there and attack and defend, and having those verbs be better understood by the guest. But it's worth just like watching as you iterate and playtest, like the guest's understanding of what's going on. And I think watch for the way the arena is set up. It's a little bit twisted from what I know here, and so I'm lacking some clarity of middle and sides. And there's, like, I don't think it's a huge thing, but it's just a thing to be aware of. Is like it's a little bit breaking the intuition, but possibly in a way that's fine.
What would you think about like maybe just in a small diagram sort of thing, like here, on like over each thing that shows like that's angled that way, that's straight, that's angled like that.
Sure. I mean, it's mostly as you're iterating, as you're playing this. I think as a team, play it, and especially play it and talk about your strategies. And I think one thing to do is see how you are working and playing through it. See who's getting good at it, and then your goal is get a naive guest to do that in their first time they play it. Like by their third or fourth round, they're feeling that strategy and they're doing that. Is a way to like understand what it means to play this and then how to scaffold a guest to that place. Cool. All right. Good work, team. All right. So that was all 9 teams. Really awesome work. I think that you are all embracing festival in really fun ways, which is good to see. And I think as we sort of look at the world, the message of like iteration and seeing like how guests are feeling it and what is exciting about it is the thing to focus on. But I think everything's going in a great direction. It's definitely putting pressure on the festival itself to like, we've got to make sure the venue works well for what you all are doing. So that meeting tomorrow will be fun. But it definitely seems like we're going to have a lot of like really good experiences for guests. So with that, we'll probably have some TA announcements this afternoon near the end of class. But keep pushing on this stuff. Keep iterating. As a heads up, this Thursday is probably going to be another office hour day. Really, this round 5 is about just getting time on task, iterating, playing things out. I'm going to try to make myself more available to like talk with you. Like if you want to grab me and play test, I'm happy to meet you in the platform rooms. So really, this week, take what you have, look at it, think about it, and make it bigger, better, and cooler. And yeah, we'll see where everything ends up next week. So good work, everyone.